In this short little video, I am going to explain in the steps and what I have to do to create my final major project animation, Lifebulb. So over here is your project window. Now what your project window is it holds all of the assets you import into Adobe After Effects for your animation or whatever it is you're doing. You can import maybe a video you've recorded in there, but it just all goes into it. Now, why it all says composition under the type is because you need it to say, when you import something, you need it to say composition, so Adobe After Effects basically registers with it and it knows you want to be able to edit that. So if I were to just import, let's say, Clinton bulb, okay, I've set it to composition. This is now, so After Effects now knows that after I import this, I want to basically mess around with it. I want to edit about. I want to maybe be able to make him talk. But its usual form is a footage. But you don't want it as footage, or else it's just gonna be just one long line of just him. You won't be able to animate it. It will basically either merge all of them together, or you can just choose a layer and it will just show that layer throughout the entire thing. But we don't want that. If we want a composition, then we'll be able to edit it all. Now down here we have our Photoshop file. This is the initial composition where all the bulbs are going to go into it, and this is basically the entire scene of the animation. But what I've done is if I've clicked on these so I can animate them individually, and then instead of just animating them all at once, I've animated them individually, like I've lip synced. I'm going to start lip syncing as well, and then if I animate them in this, then they will show here, because basically what this is because I've dragged these compositions into this composition. This is all just one big composition. These are little like sub compositions if I click on them. So because they're in there and I've clicked on it, I can animate this or this, and if I press this, then you can see Frank's mouth starts to move. So basically I have animated him a bit, and yeah, that is a composition inside basically another composition. Now what we have down here are these little things called keyframes. Now what a keyframe is it's basically the way you create your character. You bring your character to life through keyframes. Now usually a keyframe is just this natural diamond shape, but the reason mine are square is because if I right click on it, I've got this setting enabled, which is toggle hold keyframe. So if I place a keyframe and I have it set on that, it will hold that keyframe throughout the entire thing up until I want to change the keyframe. But if I have it as this, we can see I have it as a smile there, but it only holds it for a short little frame before it returns to there. And we don't, well, the reason for that is we don't want it like that. So the reason, if you click toggle hold keyframe, it'll turn it into this, which that basically means it's just starting keyframe, but for me it won't be. I have it set to that, or just one straight mouth for it, and then I've animated all of this. Now for some reason it won't, while I'm recording this, it won't record the audio from it, but I'm now going to talk you through lip syncing. Alright, so the way I lip sync is if I just hold control and I drag across the audio, what I want to do is I want to go to a particular sound that he makes. So here he would have made the th sound. So what I would do is I just zoom in on it to that particular keyframe, and here we have the mouse composition. Under it you can see it says time remapping. This is how I select all of the mouse that I use to basically create my animation, and it's how I lip sync. But as you can see, it has a number here. I have dedicated each mouth to its own keyframe. So if we just go up here, so we see the oo, the s, and the t and all that, the th, the l, the smile, the regular one for b, p, and all that. That basically is r, e, whatever you want, and a f sound. I've dedicated all these to their own keyframe. Now, the way you would do that usually is the way you would do that usually is you would go into the mouths, you would highlight them all, and you'd go only select up to one keyframe. You'd press the left square bracket to cut them all off like that, and then you would basically just deselect them. You would have to go to composition settings, change it to 8 keyframes because you only really need 7 to 8 mouths. And then what you would do is you would drag each of these into their own little their own little keyframe. So now if I go back into Frank Bulb, what I can do is if I select this time remapping and I scroll through it, as you can see his mouth starts to change. And that is exactly what we want to lip sync. Now down here I have this thing called opacity. Currently Frank begins off the animation coughing, so I've got these little cross eyes to say like he's really tightening up his eyes because it's starting to hurt a bit. But usually we would show a right eyebrow, a left eyebrow, and the bags under his eyes. But I have these set to opacity. Now this little stopwatch here, I have these opacity settings set to 0. Now what this little stopwatch here is if I deselect that, I need to reselect it so I can create it as a keyframe. So now I know that if it's there, so if I just up this opacity, and I maybe scroll down here and turn it down again, and if I just start playing that, as you can see, the bags will end up disappearing. The bags will end up disappearing and reappearing. So let me just set that back to 0. Now I am going to talk to you about a few problems that my After Effects has occurred while I've been trying to create my animation. I've gotten further than what I have at this point while recording this, but sometimes I get a little error window saying error 16. Now the error 16 window is basically saying it won't open, so I'd have to uninstall and reinstall it, and then I just lose all of my progress. But I've somehow managed to fix it now, so it's not going to have that problem anymore. What's another problem I've had? That is basically the only problem I have had while creating my animation that I can recall. But I'm now going to talk to you about I'm now going to walk through you how I created the audio for the animation. Now to create the audio file for my animation, I've got basically a bunch of my friends to voice act, because I'm in this little community where I help out with short films and all that. But we here, and I'd basically know a bunch of voice actors, so I've gotten them to voice act for me. So if I just drag this in, here we have Clinton's lines. Now what I would do is I would go over to the script. I would look at the script here, and I would look at each individual line. And then what I would do is I would find that line. So it begins with Frank saying, begins with a bit of a Frank cough. So here is Frank coughing. So I would find up to that point to where he would stop that line, which is about here, I'd say. So we'd split it, and then we'd get Phil's voice, and then we'd put his voice. Then we'd put what he says there. So basically it all matches up. That's how we create the audio for an animation or a short film or whatever it is you're making. That's how you create the audio for it. And the program I was using for this was Sony Vegas Pro 14. The reason I did that is because I don't really have a animating voice software that I can put together, and I just find this a lot easier to use because I've used it for about 3 years now, and it's just so much easier for me to use because I know what I'm doing with it. Now for zoom in on the animation, because my animation has a lot of close-ups, I am going to show you what I did and how I do it. So here I will show you how to zoom in and all that. Here is just for an example, it's just a YouTube video that I am editing for a friend. Now the way we zoom in, so if I just select a little piece here, just say where he's just digging at the wall here, I'd zoom in and I'd select this little tool here. To make it easy to see, I'll select it here. I'd select this little tool here. Now what this is basically for the video effects. So what you can do is, if you look, you can rotate it. It'll show it here. It'll show it there. You can rotate it. If I just restore it, you can zoom in. So here's what we would do. If we just zoom in on the character, here, whilst this video is playing here, he would jump out the bus, and then obviously it would just zoom in to what he was doing. But if we come to the end of the clip, then it zooms back out, as we can see. So that is how I'm going to create my close-ups for my animation. I'm basically going to render it in After Effects, import it into Sony Vegas, and then do all this zooming in that I've just showed you. So yeah, that was the process of creating my animation, and hopefully you've learned something from it and you can create your own animation eventually. But that is basically it, and I hope to see you when my animation is actually completed.